Every time the president steps outside the White House and looks up, a fleet of identical green helicopters is already waiting. But only one of them has the president on board. Nobody outside that operation knows which one. Not the press, not foreign intelligence, not even most of the people standing on the lawn. And that is just where the story starts. Most people think Marine One is a specific helicopter. It is not. Marine One is a call sign. Any US Marine Corps helicopter carrying the president automatically becomes Marine One the moment he boards. The second he steps off, it goes back to being a regular military aircraft. The name follows the man, not the machine. Same goes for Air Force One. Same goes for the presidential limo, which gets called Cadillac One. The president travels inside a moving bubble of call signs wherever he goes. Now here's where the helicopter story gets interesting. Every time the president flies, multiple identical VH-92 helicopters lift off at exactly the same time. They fly in formation, taking different routes to the same destination. Only a handful of people with the highest security clearance know which helicopter the president is actually sitting in. It is one of the simplest deception tactics in presidential security, and it works because there is no way to tell them apart from the outside. But before any of that happens, the helicopter gets torn apart. Not literally, but close. A team of specialists sweeps the entire aircraft for electronic surveillance devices before every single flight. Every surface, every seat, every panel. This happens even if the helicopter never left a secured facility. The assumption is always that someone could have gotten to it. In presidential security, paranoia is not a flaw. It is the job. The unit responsible for all of this is called HMX-1, Marine Helicopter Squadron 1. Most people have never heard of it, and honestly that anonymity is probably intentional. It was established in December 1947, at a moment when the US military was rethinking everything about how it operated after World War II. The helicopter was still a novelty back then. Nobody was entirely sure what it was good for. But a small group of planners saw its potential for executive transport and quietly built a unit around that one idea. One squadron, one mission, one client. From the very beginning, HMX-1 existed for a single purpose: to move the president. That has not changed in nearly 80 years. The pilots who fly Marine One go through a selection process so demanding that most applicants never make it through. They train for years specifically for this role. They fly no combat missions, no cargo runs, no routine operations. This is all they do. And because of that, they are arguably the most specialized helicopter pilots on the planet. Those pilots are trained to fly in complete silence when the situation calls for it. In certain threat conditions, all non-essential communication is shut off for the entire flight. No chatter, no radio coordination. The pilots know the routes, the contingencies, and the emergency procedures so completely that verbal communication becomes secondary. They have flown these routes so many times that the muscle memory takes over long before the conscious mind catches up. Now let us talk about the aircraft itself, because this is where things get genuinely surprising. The current Marine One is the VH-92A, and the program to develop and build it cost over $5 billion. Each individual aircraft costs roughly $400 million for a helicopter. Stop and sit with that number for a second. $400 million. That is not a typo. But when you understand what is packed inside, it starts to make a strange kind of sense. Step inside and you would not immediately know you were on a military aircraft. The cabin is finished in cream and beige tones with dark wood accents. The seats are wide, cushioned, and arranged like a private jet rather than a troop transport. There are individual reading lights, fold-out tables, and enough legroom that even a tall person sits comfortably for the entire flight. The carpet runs wall to wall. Nothing rattles. The noise levels inside the cabin are low enough that the president can hold a conversation in a normal speaking voice while flying at full speed. But here is what is really happening underneath that calm interior. The communications suite built into the cabin allows the president to make fully encrypted calls to anyone in the world from the air. The system connects to the same secure networks used in the White House Situation Room. A call made from Marine One at 2,000 feet is just as secure as one made from the Oval Office. Foreign intelligence agencies cannot crack it in real time. The equipment that makes that possible takes up a significant portion of the aircraft's internal systems. The windows look normal, but they are anything but. They are layered composite panels built to stop small arms fire and resist blast pressure from a close-range explosion. They are tinted so that nobody on the ground can see inside. The president can look out. Nobody can look in. And the seats themselves go beyond what you find on any commercial aircraft. Each one has a multi-point restraint system built for crash survivability. The floors and seat mounts are reinforced to absorb impact forces that would be fatal in a standard helicopter. Every detail inside that cabin was engineered around one priority: keeping one specific person alive. If you are finding this interesting, go ahead and hit subscribe. There is a lot more coming on this channel. A military doctor travels on every flight. Not a medic, a physician. They carry equipment for trauma care, cardiac emergencies, and a range of critical scenarios. The medical kit includes medications, airway management tools, and defibrillation capability. The doctor is not there just in case. They are listed as an essential crew member on every manifest. Think about what that means. Every single flight, without exception, there is a doctor on board ready to respond to a life-threatening emergency. That is not standard procedure for any other aircraft on Earth. And speaking of crew, here is something that surprises most people. When the president travels internationally, Marine One does not fly itself there. It gets loaded into a C-17 or C-5 Super Galaxy, flown to the destination, reassembled, and made ready before the president arrives. The rotor blades fold flat for transport, then unfold and lock into flight readiness under any weather conditions, anywhere in the world, on short notice. That folding mechanism went through thousands of test cycles before anyone signed off on it. Because in this program, nothing gets assumed. Everything gets proven. Now here's something the Air Force will never fully confirm. The specific defensive systems on Marine One are classified, but it is publicly acknowledged that presidential helicopters carry electronic countermeasures and infrared flare systems designed to decoy heat-seeking missiles. The exact configuration, how many flares are carried, what electronic warfare capabilities are built in, none of that is public knowledge. What is confirmed is that the threat of a shoulder-fired missile is taken seriously and the aircraft is equipped to deal with it. What that equipment actually looks like, that stays classified. And the color scheme that everyone recognizes is not just tradition. The dark green paint used by HMX-1 is a deliberate security choice. That color makes the helicopters significantly harder to track visually against most natural backgrounds at altitude. It also reduces the effectiveness of thermal imaging in certain lighting conditions. The iconic look that has appeared on magazine covers and news broadcasts for decades is partly the result of a security calculation made a long time ago. Think about this for a second. The flight from the White House to Andrews Air Force Base takes about 10 minutes, 10 miles. But during those 10 minutes, air traffic control has cleared the entire airspace, Secret Service teams are already positioned at key points along the route, and a full communications network is monitoring every second from wheels up to touchdown. A 10-minute commute surrounded by more security infrastructure than most international summits. And the president does not always know the exact flight path in advance. For certain threat levels, the specific route is finalized by the Secret Service and HMX-1 without the full details being shared with the broader travel team until shortly before departure. The route can change multiple times based on real-time intelligence. The president boards knowing the destination. How they get there is handled by someone else. HMX-1 pilots train for landing conditions that most helicopter pilots would consider extreme. Marine One has put down on the decks of moving aircraft carriers, in remote mountain locations during international summits, and in urban environments with almost no clearance on any side. The pilots read terrain, weather, and obstacles in ways that go well beyond standard rotary wing training. There is a reason the selection process is as brutal as it is. And when the aircraft is not flying, someone is always worried about it. Marine One undergoes maintenance checks so thorough that entire crews work around the clock between presidential flights. Every component gets inspected. Mechanics need top-secret security clearance and cannot discuss their work outside the facility. They cannot tell family members what they do. The same secrecy that surrounds the flight itself extends to everything that happens on the ground. There is also the matter of what happens at the destination. When Marine One lands at a foreign location, a security perimeter goes up around the aircraft immediately. Armed guards are posted. No foreign nationals are permitted near it under any circumstances. The classified systems on board cannot be allowed to fall into the wrong hands even for a moment, even on the tarmac of an allied country. The aircraft is treated as a sovereign piece of American territory wherever it lands. And here is a fact that puts all of this into perspective. Since Dwight Eisenhower became the first president to fly on a military helicopter in 1957, no president has ever been injured aboard Marine One. That first flight is worth pausing on. Eisenhower was not exactly a man who scared easily. He had commanded the largest military operation in history, but even he had reservations about climbing into a helicopter, a machine that was still considered experimental by much of the public at the time. The flight happened anyway, partly because his security team had started to realize that motorcades through Washington were becoming a liability. too predictable, too exposed. The helicopter offered something the motorcade never could: the ability to lift straight up and disappear. That first flight lasted just a few minutes, but it changed presidential security forever. Perfect safety record. Nearly 7 decades of operation, thousands of flights, changing threat environments, evolving technology. Not one presidential injury. In an operation this complex, running this long, that record is almost harder to believe than any of the classified details. The old VH-3D Sea Kings that Marine One replaced carried every president from Kennedy to Obama. That is 11 presidents over roughly 5 decades. Several of those aircraft were kept flying well past their normal service life because of how reliable they had proven. When they were finally retired, something interesting happened. The airframes were not scrapped. They were preserved. A few ended up in museums. One sits at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library, another at the Reagan Library. Because a helicopter that carried 11 presidents through the Cold War, through assassinations and attempted assassinations, through the fall of the Berlin Wall and the days after September 11th, does not end up in a junkyard. It ends up behind glass, where it belongs. One more thing worth knowing. The president does not request Marine One the way you would book a car. The entire operation is initiated and managed by the Secret Service in coordination with HMX-1. By the time the president walks out of the White House, every pilot is already strapped in, every countermeasure is already armed, and every decoy helicopter is already spinning up. The president walks to the helicopter. Everything else was already in motion long before he stepped outside. From the decoy fleet at takeoff to the classified countermeasures at altitude, Marine One is less a helicopter and more a flying operation. Every detail has been engineered, tested, and in most cases, classified. The cream-colored seats, the encrypted phones, the bulletproof windows, the physician sitting 3 feet from the president. None of it is an accident. All of it exists, because at some point, someone sat down and asked what could go wrong, and then they built the answer.